Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's 12 noon East Coast time. Capriato Town Hall Academy, as we do it every single Friday. We're in our, what week are we in? Does anyone know? 230, I think. Yeah, 230th week. We're going to talk about second in command, a CEO perspective. I got a couple of great shop owners that are going to be here and talk about this. Hey, we're coming to you live from the Remarkable Results Radio podcast studio. And this is the industry's first and was always the first and consistent single subject forum that has likened to a 40-minute 20 group. And if you're with us on social media, I'd love to have you give us a check in with your city, a like, a comment, a share. Always fine. We're live on Facebook, we're live on LinkedIn, and we're live on YouTube, and also on my website, remarkableresults.biz. Every Friday afternoon at 12 noon Eastern, we're here. Be a fly on the wall while you bury yourself in this discussion that we're nailing the hottest topics and trends that are making waves in our industry. Hey, great sponsors bring us this show. Let's talk about them. Let's face it, technicians are your inventory of time, and it's the only inventory that expires every minute of every day. Maximize sales and speed to get the cars moving through your business faster. Learn more at getshopware.com. Hey, and are you tired of your cookie cutter website? Is it bringing you new clients? Well, if not, let our friends at Shop Marketing Pros create a website that is as unique as your shop on the web at shopmarketingpros.com. Well, who's here? Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and thanks. As I jump the gun to say who's with me today, a couple of great guys. Scott Brown, Cardinal Plaza Shell, Springfield, Virginia. Hey, how you doing, Scott?
Hey, Carm, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on. It's my first time with you, so I hope everyone makes allowances for me.
Well, Scott, we have that terrible sound coming out of your microphone right now, so we're going to have to ask you to possibly unplug your headset and let me see, maybe try it just from the computer's speaker and microphone, possibly. So if you could go to the settings and try to make that, it would be impossible to have Scott on the show with that kind of noise going on. And while we wait for all of that, let me introduce to you Craig Noel from Sun Automotive, Springfield, Oregon. Hey, how you doing, Craig?
Carm, how you doing? It's a fantabulous Friday around here.
Yeah, I bet you it is. It's 9 o'clock in the morning out there on the great Pacific Coast. And by the way, while we're waiting for Scott to get fixed up at his end, you have an episode coming out this Tuesday.
I heard you broke the news this morning as I plugged in. That's awesome.
Yeah, I did. That was really, really a good episode. Thank you so much for that. While we,
I hope I'm back.
Well, you are, and you're very, it's not going to be what we want, Scott, but at least you're there with us.
My spirit is with you.
So welcome, sir.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Both in Springfield, one in Virginia, one in Oregon. And as Scott was telling me, there's probably 48 states that all have a Springfield city. And good to have you here. Both have great, incredible businesses, which is the reason that they're here, because they're growing. And in our industry, everyone, there is an awful lot of talk about being second in command and having a real general manager appointed so that the CEO can go on with other duties and other tasks with other focus. And in your case, Craig, you've got a general manager. You've got 4 operations. No doubt you would need one. And in the case of you, Scott, you've got a single location, but a very big and a very powerful location. And this is allowing Scott to do some other things. And in fact, Scott's coming on this Tuesday on the Aftermarket Weekly show, and he is going to talk about his newest operation, a technology center. I can't wait to hear all about that. So we've basically teased our audience. So guys, let's start. Craig, I want to go to you first. Why have a general manager or a COO second in command?
Well, actually pretty easy. I'll paint kind of a really quick picture. So effective basically this coming July 1st. It will be 10 years that I've actually been with this company. And so as I entered into the purchase of it in 2017, it's coming up on 5 years. I knew when I purchased, which is 3 locations, I knew that even though my role at the time was general manager, going into a 4th location, I felt and knew that I needed that general manager in there. And I think, in regards to Scott and his location, I think that really it doesn't really depend upon location per se. It really has to do with employee count and how much business you're doing, and then how much oversight needs to be done. So in my particular case, I knew when I went to 4, I needed that help, because I think now more than ever, Scott can probably attest to this, that the attention that needs to be paid on the business, everything from recruiting that we touched on last episode to, everything on the internal, external side, there's going to be much more attention that's going to be needed to be successful. So.
Yeah, I think, Craig, that what you said is completely valid. And I think the roles between a CEO and a COO are completely different. And, for years, I've been trying to give my 2 main general managers some ownership skills. And that mainly consisted of me allowing them to make decisions, in conjunction with our cornerstones, which is our strategy statements, that as long as the decisions follow along those, then everything's going to be fine. It keeps the consistency. But then I realized that there was a lot that I didn't know. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And it started taking some CEO training last May. And then the COO training to support it started, for Chris last July into August of last year. And, so we have our roles separated. And, it's like having guardrails, so we stay in our lane. We're all moving the same direction down the road, and it works out really, really well.
I gotta ask a question about CEO training, guys. How powerful? How important? Obviously, Scott, you've had it, so bring us in on that.
Well, I would say it's something. It's kind of like when I first signed up for shop training. And I grew up in the shops, so I'm 2nd generation. I've been there for over 40 years. The shop's been here for 52 years now. And it's kind of humbling when you have to admit to yourself, hey, I don't have all the answers. And it was the same thing with the CEO training. I've been running the shop for 20 years. And you realize, hey, there's people that have things that can teach you. And it was a big stretch, it's a big leap for all of us to get together and undertake the training. And it's been wonderful. Like I say, we're learning about ourselves, but we're learning about our businesses, but then we're also learning, the relationship between the CEO and the COO. And it's completely powerful. And it's different than having a general manager, which I picture is kind of like a mini me, doing the same things that I was doing, helping me out with some of the load. Now, we're separated, and I take care of my functions and he takes care of his functions. And we can talk about what those are, but it's, I really recommend this. And even more, if you're a single shop owner and you're doing the job by yourself, I think it's valuable to understand when you're in the COO role and when you're wearing the hat of the CEO, because I was talking to a guy just the other day, and a young shop owner that I'm trying to mentor, and he had like 5 things on his plate for that one day, and some were one role and some were the other role, and I was overwhelmed. He wasn't. I guess that has to do with being younger than I am, but it was good to give him that framework.
Hey, Craig, I have to ask you a question. One of the things that Scott said was a GM is a mini me. And I thought that was so interesting. And your role in your company is a GM. So how does that fit in your mindset strategy?
Well, so and as I alluded to, earlier when I kind of came on, it there really is kind of a separation between what you really need, what you want. I think there's a really important identifier to kind of figure out what's going to be the complement to you, what's kind of your yin and his yang kind of a thing. And in my particular case, I got extremely lucky. I was very thorough with regards to making sure that anybody who was interested in, this next move in the company, that they knew of the opportunity. So we had 3 internal candidates that were interested. I had an inkling that Brian would be the successor to that and the winner of the spot. Well-deserving, worked 20 years in the company, so he knows the culture, knows the people. He's a great cheerleader. But here's the benefit that was, for me, rewarding. He is he's very attentive to detail. And when it comes to training my advisors, he's worked real closely with Elite and Jen and all those crew over there with regards to additional kind of support and input. And so he trains all my advisors, and that just in that by itself, his attention to detail relative to inventory, processes, equipment, all of that stuff, it took so much off my plate that I think the compliment to whoever you've got one way or the other is going to be so important to the relationship. As Scott kind of alluded to, it's really important and kind of special. The role is special to each company.
Could we agree, guys, that GM and COO, even though one seems to be a classier, cooler title, they're both the same? They're both doing the same thing for you?
I'm not even sure how to answer that. I know that the way we have it set up is working really, really well for us. It's certainly different than anything I've ever experienced in the 40 years I've been at the shop. What's going on, with my management structure now. So it's pretty amazing.
So Scott, would you call your guy Chris GM if there were no other titles available?
I mean, honestly, I call him COO, and the reason is, so as a CEO, I have basically 4 jobs. I keep them right here in front of me. I have to stay in the future. I got to manage my executive team, set the vision and the strategy cornerstones, and allocate resources. And those are the jobs that every CEO on every Fortune 500 company manage. Chris he's staying in the now. He's managing his own executive team. He executes the vision that I come up with, and he leads change. He communicates with the team, ensures that the operations run smoothly. So he's doing a lot of the same things as a general manager would do. Okay. But it's just the overall vision, the way he thinks about himself is, and the fact that he's in the now and I'm in the next, and it seems to work out really well.
He's in the now and you're in the next. I like that. That's a soundbite from here. Okay, look, let's just make this assumption, guys, that we now know why, and it's important and it has worked for you. Now let's get into a little bit of the how. Craig, you were telling me about being present. Mm-hmm. Let's go into that. Let's explain that.
Well, so I heard this wonderful statement. I'm going to butcher his last name. His name is Richard. Is it Kinnison? He was a motivational speaker that came to one of the conferences, and I remember him vividly stating that as a COO, CEO, president, manager, whatever it may be, that you want your presence present when you're not present. And it resonated a lot with me, because really what you want everybody to be able to do is continue on with what you want to have happen on a daily basis, even if you're not there. And that has to go with a lot of work and investment in the internal culture, so that all of that is related to the external culture, which is basically, all your vendors and customers. So, in a nutshell, that one was an important one for me. So it had to do with somebody who really understood how I personally felt about what we as an industry are about and what we need to provide to be exceptional in our industry. And that's an interesting one to define. How do you be exceptional in the automotive business, right? You could talk about being exceptional making a pizza, but how do you actually do that, right? How do you take a potential negative situation with a customer walking into the door knowing they got to spend money just to get the keys back to go pick up the kids and figure out what's going on with dinner versus somebody who's going to go buy a big screen TV, go home, turn on the big game, and be happy about what they spent their money on? It's a different approach, right? So there you go.
Hey, so what I think I heard you say, and clarify this, is in the situation where Brian and or the team needs to make the decision, they're thinking in the back of their mind, what would Craig do?
Correct. That's correct. That's it right there.
And your job is to make sure that they have learned from you, that the culture's right, the strategy's right, the processes are in play, where that what would Craig do shouldn't be a hard decision.
That is correct, right? And so here are the two easy things to identify with that. First one is, a lot of times I think our consumers are in our industry are beat up with what ends up being a business decision. And I think if you come back from that, back up a little bit and start making moral decisions, we're talking 100% due north moral decisions. The decisions for what you do about customers becomes really easy, right? And the second one is that, you know, when you're trying to make sure that they understand kind of how you want them to think, you have to be able to kind of be willing to let go of some of that I wouldn't say trust. You need to let go to be able to make sure they learn something. And here's an example, right? So when you start to field these questions about, you know, hey, I've got this, and it can be anything. It can be an employee issue. It can be a customer issue, a financial issue, you know, whatever it may be. Instead of giving the order, you know, quote unquote, giving the request, you're going to ask a lot of questions. What would you do? To try to understand quickly their thought process and how they think. And that's where you start the coaching.
What would you do? I've always known that a good CEO always asks questions, in many cases, that they already know the answer to, but they want to find out what their people are thinking. And you don't necessarily have to always have an answer.
True. And you might just learn something.
Wow. Scott, chime in anytime, but while you're going to make a comment on this, I would also love you to cover the fact that you took your second in command, Chris, and got him to be mentored by another shop owner.
Yeah, that's kind of a neat thing. And it's really awesome when you have the relationships, you know, in the automotive aftermarket. Everybody is so supportive of each other. And Chris came to work for me over 20 years ago. He was in high school. And I didn't really think about it then, but we really had kind of a mentor-mentee relationship. You know, those were words that they weren't even in my vocabulary then. But as he was becoming, you know, giving him ownership skills, the relationship stayed the same. But then when he became COO, I'm like, I want this to really succeed. And I said, I need to have a different relationship with Chris. And so I asked one of my really good friends, Lee, can I say Lee Weatherby from Arizona?
Yeah, I know Lee.
Yeah, I know he's been on with you before. I said, would you become a mentor to Chris? And they talk on the phone every single week on Wednesday mornings. You know, they set aside that time. I mean, I think Lee must be up at like 5 a.m. to do this because of the time change.
Yeah.
And that's allowed my relationship with Chris to evolve into more of a equal relationship, which is where it needs to be. And, you know, because we're both doing equally important things in our organization, and it's just a matter of, you know, so it can't have one above the other. And it works out well. And Craig, I love what you were saying. You know, I think the importance of consistency in your shop and in your organization can never be overstated. You know, in my shop, I almost consider that more of a culture question than a COO question, but I always want to push the decisions as far down into the organization as I can, because, you know, I hate to separate the decisions from the people that are actually doing the work. I want the people that are doing the work to make the decisions. And that's always been part of our culture. But then we also, you know, when we developed these cornerstone statements, and then I also have a little promise plan. As long as they stay consistent with everything that's our cornerstones and with what we promise to our customers, and they know what it is, big posters on the wall, they're never going to be in trouble. They're never, I mean, we let them spend, I let them buy their own tools. I let them buy, with my credit card, and whatever they need, we'll talk about it later. But again, as long as they're following our cornerstones, they're like decision filters that will, that allow them to make the same decision that I would at any time. And I honestly can't remember the last time someone called me for an operational decision. Certainly not in the last 8 or 9 months. And, because that's not my job, and because it's they know what to do. It's right there on the wall, and it works really, really well.
So, Karn, he just basically described to you a difference between a GM and a COO, and here I can identify it. Where Scott is 100% confident in even up to financial decisions on a daily basis, whereas I'm going through a coaching process with Brian, my GM, and he will be working into that COO role probably within the next 6 to 12 months as I become more remote, right? So there has to be that level of trust so that, as Brad or as Scott said, right, you've got the cornerstone of how you're going to operate. And once he understands those thought processes, which it takes a while to develop that, right, then the trust becomes there, and he's going to make the right call. That's the difference right there.
Wow, cool. Hey, guys, I love where this is going. Thank you so much. Let's take a timeout, come back for segment B. How much paper have you touched today? Those are piles of time, stacked all over the shop. Think of what you could do with that time and how many more cars you could get through the door. Cha-ching. It's time for a digital shop management system. Shopware. GetShopware.com/Karm. And does your social media truly represent your shop, or is it just plain vanilla generic posts? Well, it doesn't have to be that way. The experts, my friends over at Shop Marketing Pros, listen and create social content that connects you to your community on the web at shopmarketingpros.com. Hey guys, I think we're really opening up some wide eyes on this show, as of course we'll repurpose this as a podcast next Thursday. Craig, one of the things you were talking to me about, you can't have a role like this. First of all, I don't think you can have a role like this in the entire company for everyone to respect that hierarchy up and down without great communications.
Absolutely. So when it goes to the communication part of it, not only is the communication got to be one way, but it has to be the other, right? Up and down. Now, here's the part of it that's really, really important, because if you don't stay, as Scott says, right, within your lanes, what you don't want to do is have the authority or respect or anything that would be relative to the position we're both talking about undercut in any way, right? We don't want to cut their ankles off. So even though there may be a private moment where we say, hey, we could have made a better decision here, there, or whatever, we always want to make sure that everybody else that would be below said position is communicating well with that individual, so they don't start to develop this kind of workaround kind of process. And so I think that's really important in the beginning to kind of set that up so that everybody, again, understands what the role is. So if I say, for example, somebody calls me, I say, hey, did you talk to Brian about that? Oh, well, no. Talk to Brian about that. And then you start to, and this was in the beginning, we're good now, but it took about 3 months before, they understood that, well, let's go. Brian knows what to do. Brian knows what to do.
Craig, I want to stop you. Even though you anointed Brian as your general manager, and here's his role, and here's exactly the things he's going to be doing, your people heard you, yet they didn't practice it.
That's right, out of habit. And I had to change the habit. And by doing exactly what I just described, it began to more quickly establish the trust, so that even though Brian may call me later and say, hey, this is kind of situation going on, they knew that the answer they were receiving was from the most important, which is their direct supervisor. And that's, again, it just goes to credibility, trust, and all those things.
Scott, that happened to you?
Yeah, I think with with both Brian and with Chris, they're the one guy or the two guys in our organizations where they have to both manage down and manage up. Like Craig and I, we only manage down, because we're at the, because we have direct reports, but we're not reporting to anyone else. Chris has got to manage me, and he's got to manage, the executive guys that are below him. And then in turn, they'll manage the production guys, the light service techs, what have you. And I think that Craig is right. And you can't be good at communication, I think, by accident. I always thought that I was good at communication and that the shop was doing a good job with communication until we did a survey earlier this year. And it turns out I'm awful at it, so it's become a priority, for both Chris and for me, to try to, I think I was the worst grades, certainly in my 20 group, maybe in the entire organization, but it was, it's amazing. So the other thing that we did an assessment that is beyond a Wonderlic, but it actually tells, how we process information. Chris and I and Cam, and Cam was the other one that I was giving ownership issues to, or ownership training. He's now my partner at the level 5, the technology shop. So we'll talk about him next week. But it's the assessment really shows how we work together in the points where maybe we have to dial down our assertiveness, or the points where maybe we need to increase our urgency, just because a lot of the things were exactly the same. And in some areas, by being different, just knowing the differences in our personalities and in our communication skills and our emotional intelligence, it allows us to give the team more of what they need. And I'm not even sure I made any sense right there, but I tried to.
Well, you know what? I'm going to ride some coattails here. So Scott brought up something that reminded me of something very, very key and important for everybody out there to listen. When I was general manager, there was a point where Brian, who was the manager of one of my stores at the time, made a comment. He says, "Man, you just never come by. I hardly ever see you." He was somewhat kidding and ribbing me. We have a great relationship. But I said, "What do you mean?" I go, "I don't have to come by because you do such a great job." Now, in my head, that made a resounding message to myself, which was that sometimes we as either owners or even higher up managers, we tend to, grease that squeaky wheel, but we need to remember those wheels that are spinning smoothly. And I think that especially when it comes to this role, my 70-30 rule, which is 70% mental positive, deposits versus 30% withdrawals. I think it's so important to this role to continue to cheerlead that individual, because those things are going to carry huge amounts of weight for them to be able to continue to cheerlead others. And so don't take for granted just because things may be going smooth. Continue to cheerlead even that position, because as we all know in ownership roles, right, the bigger the position, the bigger the target, right? So all the negatives can become pretty easy for those people to start getting arrows, and you want to support them. Keep supporting and making mental deposits that are positive.
I agree. Well, I'll just drop the mic for you that time. That was well said, Craig.
Let me stop for a moment and clarify, or at least Craig, get you to clarify to the audience that when you're talking about deposits, I always learned way back that's the emotional bank account that we all have. If you constantly pull it out, you create a weak in the mind or weak in spirit individual. So I love that. The bank
account goes negative. The bank account goes negative.
70% in the emotional bank account that helps build people find their stride, find their positives, and the 30% withdrawals is really you're giving direction and guidance basically.
Absolutely. And what you'll find if you continue with that consistency is that probably 80% of the time during those 30% withdrawals, they even look at you with you and say, "Yeah, I could have done a better job." Right? You don't get that bite back because the negative has overcome the positive. So when you're constantly feeding them with positive energy throughout your staff, by the way, your culture internally will be the best it will ever be. And everybody starts supporting one another and cheerleading one another. And I can go on and on about another segment of that. But anyway, yes.
Yeah. I think it's neat. I don't know if you guys ever heard of something called the limbic brain, but it's actually part of our brain and it's hardwired in. And this is the trouble why we had so much trouble during the pandemic achieving the same levels of productivity, because everyone was always concerned there was a low level of anxiety having to do, with the limbic brain. But the two questions that we always have to answer for our teammates every single day, and certainly when you do your one-on-ones, and they want to know how they're doing. And so Craig just gave a great discussion on how we can tell them how they're doing, and then they need to know what's next. And you answer those two questions, and those questions are hardwired into each one of us. Then maybe I won't rate so horrible on communications, the next time we survey. And these are things that I've learned since then. And so I think it's a great discussion.
Thanks so much for that. Hey, let's come back and do segment C. There's a whole bunch of other things guys that I want to know, but one more time for our great sponsors. Every piece of paper you touch adds up to seconds, minutes, and hours of your staff's time. Get paper out of your business and unlock your employees' potential with Shopware's digital shop management software on the web at getshopware.com. Thanks so much to Shopware. And is your marketing company sharing the same vanilla social media posts for you that they do for every other shop? Well, that's not how our friends at Shop Marketing Pros do business. They believe each shop is unique with its own story. And that's the key. Contact them today on the web at shopmarketingpros.com. Guys, could you share with our audience a little bit behind the scenes? And if you can't, I respect it and I understand, but I'm ready. I'm a shop owner. It's time for a number two, no matter what title they have. It's a strong number two. How do you go about finding, I think you said earlier, Craig, the candidates that you had and someone creamed to the top? Give me an idea of what the process would look like, guys.
Ooh, Scott, you want to go? You want me to go?
I can go first. For me, it was actually pretty easy because the average, I've got employees that have been with me for 30 years and for 20 years and for 15 years. And both of these guys, now they've been with me for over 20 years apiece, that I started in the pipeline, 5 years pretty much unproductive training on my part. But now they're doing really, really well. I've had a lot of friends that have done everything. I think this is the hardest job to fill because it's almost like entering into a marriage. You've got to be compatible, both intellectually and morally and spiritually, and you've got to have the same values. And it's really tough to do that off LinkedIn. And I've had so many shop owner friends that have tried this, and 2 or 3 months later, they're trying it again.
You mean they hired from the outside?
The ones that have hired from the outside, it's really hard to make that to make that love connection, so once you've worked with somebody for 15 years, you pretty much know everything about them, or you should. Maybe you don't always, but
or shame on you, Scott, that you didn't develop them to the point where in the back of your mind, you were either looking at a successor or a strong number two. So a lot of it, someone that's been with you a long time and you never anticipated a role for them and helped train them and gift them, then shame on you. I guess you may have to look on the outside.
In our 20 group, we had a tragic situation where one of our members passed away unexpectedly. And even though he had family in the business, there was no one with ownership skills, no COO or general manager ready to step in. And the family went through an extremely hard time. And that was when I realized, hey, running a shop is not the same as owning a shop. And then I worried for my family, what happens if something happens? And that was really the main thing that started me down this path, about a decade ago. And, the fact that I ran into some CEO training that's just been, career changing for me, I'm just glad that happened. But every shop is different. And I kind of think that every CEO, COO, owner, general manager, every relationship is going to be different, just like every marriage is different. But, but there's some things like communication that that Craig was talking about, and consistency, and there's some things there that are going to be universal. But I can't tell you how to find one, because most of the people that I've talked to have not been successful. At least not the first time.
Got it. Craig, how do we find one? How do we develop one?
Okay, well, this one's going to be somewhat easy, believe it or not. If you're lucky and have internal potential candidates, I took 12 months to prime the chute. I wanted everybody to understand what my goals were, where I wanted to be. I'm a huge proactive guy, and I want everybody rowing in the same direction, and I want them to take deep strokes, baby. So to do that, they need to understand where the ship's headed, right? So here's the simple, most quickest way I tried to establish with the 3 candidates who was going to rise to the top. Because not only did I want to task them with certain things, I wanted to expose and be able to find somebody who thought like I did. And here's the credentials of which I wanted to expose, which is I treat things like chess, right? In chess, you're always thinking about the third move ahead. What I wanted this individual to be able to do, or have the ability to do, is say, for example, if we lose technician A, what's going to be our alternative plan B? Or in addition, plan C? Whether that be technician situation, whether that be another decision on marketing or something of that nature, I wanted to make sure he had that second and third option at least thought about, because you got to be ready, you got to be agile, you got to be mobile. I will frame this in a very unique way. For me, this is my 5th year of ownership. First year, I had a ice and snowstorm, shut all 3 of my stores down for 2 weeks. Second year, we had that dip in 18. Third year, ice and snowstorm again, which here doesn't even hardly ever happen. Fourth year, pandemic. You got to be ready to go, and you got to be nimble on your feet. So to be able to work with that individual to try to understand their thought processes and then coach along the way, you'll expose their thought process. And if they've already got your internal culture, bingo.
Wow, what a think here, guys. Is I love the plan A, the plan B, and the plan C. Scott, wouldn't you agree that every leader, every CEO, because you're talking about what's next, and you're talking about what's next, not in a perfect world, but probably what could be next in an imperfect world?
Yeah, you're right. And if I learned nothing else, out of the pandemic, it is that, I love my staff. I always brag about them. And, it came down to was, am I ready to, back up my words and let them fly, let them manage a lot of things, that I had no idea what the quality of my people were. The more things that I piled on top of them, I had to have one guy became we have in Virginia this thing, emergency temporary standard. It was COVID regulations. And I had to have one guy be my COVID manager, and he had to train everybody else. And it was it was a big deal. And I just piled more and more on him, and he just succeeded beyond anything I ever expected. And it happened the same way with every person on the crew. I'd let them come up with a lot of the mitigation standards, and then they implemented it because it was their decisions, and just the whole culture thing. I do think, though, that one difference between Craig and I is that I'm not necessarily looking for somebody that's just like me, because I'm more of a visionary, and most people are visionaries. I really need people to implement, and people that are going to actually, go ahead and ensure that, the ideas that we decide together are the priority, actually become a reality. And that's a hugely important thing. And I'm not great at implementation. I'm okay. I think both of us are. We have to be, or we wouldn't be successful.
Interesting. And you survived all these years not wanting to be an implementer, and then finally, you're a particular. Both of you guys, I love where this is a great episode. A lot of learning here, a lot of great stuff. But guys, a question to both of you. Your GM, Craig, your COO, Scott, are they helping you make? You've got your vision, you got some ideas, you want to do something. You present it to them. Are they helping with the decision, or is your decision already made?
Scott,
you go first, Craig.
Is the decision already made? Yes, it's made. I think that it just goes to how in tune. If I understand your question right, Carm, it just goes to how in tune he becomes to each one of the individuals to be able to make those good decisions. I think that's probably the most. If I understood your question,
your high level decision to go to a fifth branch, which could be a challenge. As an example, the team may not be ready. You may not have the right backup, but you want to challenge your team. You sit down with your general manager and say, "Hey, Brian, come on in the room. I got something to discuss with you." Even though you may have your mind made up and ready to sign a contract, hey, listen, I'm ready to do this. Let me lay it all out for you. Are you good with this? Is there anything I need to know? I mean, is this individual, this number two, at that level in helping you make those decisions?
Yes, because I find that, if you have 7 people in the room, you're going to get a heck of a lot more better input and ideas than what's only in your noggin, right? So you have to have a sense of humility. Are you going to filter that? Absolutely, through what you're thinking about. But I find that inclusiveness is very important to the culture. So when it comes to Brian, when I feel that his involvement is imperative or important to moving forward, because I want him to understand our goals. He knows that we're looking for 5 and 6. And so we start talking to him about stuff like that. I talk to him about locations. I talk about size. What do you think in regards to who internally could qualify, to run that store? I mean, there's all sorts of things that I trust him with because he's got good insight to our culture. And I think that he does make good decisions with that. And he also helps me too.
Same with you, Scott?
Yeah, I think, we work together very collaboratively. But certainly ideas can come from anywhere. We get a lot of ideas actually from the team, when we do our one-on-ones, and we'll consider all those, and then we make the decisions collaboratively. Chris has come up with tons of great ideas. And certainly, he's the one that's, executing on the strategies. A lot of times, I think that one of his main jobs is to, reel me in a little bit, kind of like, if I come up with 3 things, he's like, let's be
but that's okay, because you're the ideas guy. You're in what's next. And frankly, sometimes you get an idea and, besides trying it and getting bruised or bumped with it, you run it off of your number 2 before it's ever real. And he goes and says, "Scott, are you crazy?" And maybe that's healthy, that you could temper it down and says, "Okay, all right, great. You go back to your drawing board. You come back another month later with some rethink involved." And you, so to me, I love the idea, if you're that visionary and you're that deep thinker and you're that, I want to try this now, to run all that. Because in the beginning, in the early days, you were trying just about everything, weren't you?
We try so many different things and fail so many times. So we're really not opposed to change and not, against trying things. And, like I said, I would say the majority of things that we try end up going, back into the bottom of the pile on the desk. They just didn't work, and that's okay. Yep. It's I'd rather just keep trying and keep it fresh. And I can't tell you the number of times that, and I give them a lot of autonomy that I would say I'd start a conversation with, I think I'd advise against this thing that you're trying to do, but it's your choice. And, just because they're the doers and I'm the thinker, and whether it works, whether it doesn't work, I just consider that, part of the education.
Got it. Hey, I want to remind everyone what we're doing next Friday right here on the town hall. We're doing a great episode called Play the Long Game. Fred Guestwicki, Gilda Dykman, and Russ Crosby will be here. That's going to be a great episode. I think that is just before the 4th of July holiday weekend. I'm not sure what everyone's doing. Are we all closing on Monday? Guys, are you closing on Monday?
We are.
Of next week? Yeah, you are? Okay.
Now Scott may have just put the final nail in the coffin. Everybody's been asking me whether we should or we shouldn't, and I'm like, oh man. Now Scott just pushed me over the edge.
Damn.
All right, so this is funny. So this is how it works, with Chris and I. So he came to me. He says, "Everybody, this is on Monday when we're having our weekly meeting. They want to know what we're doing on the 5th." And I'm like, "I don't know. What do you think?" And he's like, "Well, they want to be closed." And I'm like, "Well, tomorrow morning, why don't you ask them and let them make the decision?" And so it's funny because a lot of times we'll ask them and they'll stay open. Like if Christmas is on depending on whether it's Christmas Eve or New Year, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And this time, all of them wanted to be closed except for one of the technicians. So we're going to be closed, but it's not me telling them, "Hey, I'm taking away your ability to, earn this day." It was their choice.
So I want to know this, guys.
I love that.
Why do we struggle every 6 or 7 years with this decision? Because you probably closed the last time the 4th fell on a Sunday, but we seem to struggle. We always look at, what's going on in people's minds. Where's our world? Where's our economy? Where's our business? And then we make that decision. I'm not sure everyone in the industry is going to close, but I do believe the majority of them will. Guys, I want to say this about this episode, Second in Command, from a CEO's perspective. We're not done talking about this. I think it's an important, very important trend going on in our industry, and we need to talk more about this. I know we will, and what we'll try to do in the future is to bring both Scott and Craig's second in commands, general managers, COO, into this forum and talk to them about Scott and Craig. No, we'll talk to them about their perspective on their roles and their jobs. So I thank you guys so much for being here, and really enlightening subject. I loved the great chatter we had out on social media. Scott Brown, Cardinal Plaza Shell in Springfield, Virginia, and then Craig Noel, Sun Automotive in Springfield, Oregon. Look for Craig's a fresh episode from Craig coming out Tuesday. It's going to knock you off the charts. And Scott and I are going to be together Tuesday, and we're going to talk about his new location, Level 5 Technology Shop, which is brand new. And that is going to be so cool. And the thing I found out about why he calls it Level 5 is, just think of Level 5 as it deals with autonomy, right? Level 5 cars. So we're going to hear a really cool short segment on that. So guys, thanks a lot. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Carm. Thanks, Craig.
You bet. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, guys.